right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the last Eggs and Issues. CRI is not here today, but we were able to borrow some sound equipment from them, so hopefully everyone can hear. I will be doing moderator and sound, so just give me a little bit of a break as I do both jobs. Last session, we heard from local leaders about local issues. Today we'll hear from our state representatives. We'd like to welcome back Senator Rozenboom, Representative Vander, and Representative Sheep. They're here today to provide us with a legislative update and answer questions from the community. Eggs and Issues is sponsored by the Oskaloosa Area Chamber and Development Group. We'd also like to thank Oski News, Oskaloosa Herald, CRI for the sound equipment, the Sun, and KBOE for providing coverage, and to Midwest Farm Bank for providing coffee. So I will let you gentlemen start sitting up.
I'll start off. That's agreed to here. I'll summarize my summary. The House and Senate have reached an agreement on two key issues, coupling and consumables. We'll talk about those later if you like. With the March Revenue Estimating Committee estimate on how much revenue is available, the House and Senate have reached an agreement on supplemental state aid, otherwise known as allowable growth, at 2.25%. This translates into $153 million out of $176 million of new money available to spend under the expenditure law. In other words, we're spending 87% of all new state spending this year on K through 12 education, and only leaves 13% for other areas of the budget. As a little bit of a history note on education, ongoing education spending has increased by $660 million, and the number of teachers in classrooms has grown by 809 since Republicans became the majority in the Iowa House. The average teacher salary in the state is $55,536, which has increased 37.6% over the last 10 years, which equates to an annual rate of growth compounded of 3.24%. For example, this year's average personal income growth is 1.3%. On another note, Governor Brand said signed a bill that keeps the majority of juvenile records sealed unless a judge orders them unsealed. One reason why this is important is that some of us may have conducted ourselves inappropriately while we're young, and when you're 35 or 40, it's kind of hard to explain some of that stuff. So instead of, as we have been, a youth having to request that records be sealed when they're 18, this is done automatically unless there's some reason not to do it. An example of why that's important is when a youth goes to sign up for the military, all other states around us automatically seal the records of juveniles. But a kid from Iowa, if his records are sealed, they figure, well, he must have done something, otherwise he wouldn't have sealed it. So it's a bit of a disadvantage, and so the governor signed that. I think that's a good thing. And that passed, everything up to this point has passed, but the Iowa House passed a ban on teacher sale, and I believe that's gone nowhere in the Senate. So I'll hand it over to.
Thank you, Larry. That is a remarkably detailed summary of what's happened. There is very little left to do, in my opinion. We've got to pass the DHS appropriations bill, which is the other big one besides education. And other than that, I expect it to be pretty routine. It's been a slower than usual session. And I think for the first time since I've been in the legislature, we may actually get out on time, which would be a good thing for the state as well as for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. These guys said touched on most of the big things, I think. I guess I have a concern whether this is an official Eggs and Issues. Not only is CRI not here, Larry Lindsley isn't here. So I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah, they've touched on the big stuff. I agree with the representatives that this session will wind up quickly, and that's a good thing. We continue, I'm on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and of course we have most of those big items in front of us in terms of workload, just to sort through all the appropriations. But now that the big domino has fallen, the education, and as Representative Vander said, the HHS budget will be another big piece of that. Then the smaller pieces will fall into place, I think, rather soon. I'm certain that we'll find something to bog us down in some way, but I think overall we're in good shape in terms of getting done on time. So glad to take your questions.
All right, would someone like to start us off with a question this morning?
No joke, no joke. Dave Cruzell, this time more as CFO at Interpower Corporation. That you mentioned the consumables, and that's something that's meaningful to our business. In the past, the Iowa Department of Revenue has put out a listing saying these are the things that are taxable, these are the things that are not taxable to your business. Do we have an estimated timeline as to when those types of rules would come out, or there would be notice from the Department of Revenue as to here's what the new rules are based upon the legislation?
I would expect that to happen fairly quickly, given that we have now done away with the rules that they wrote last year that were to go in effect, I think, 1 July. They probably have to start from square one, but it'll be much simplified because now we'll go back to what's in the code. And what's in the code is what we just passed, in essence, that was in rule. So they aren't going to have to add very much. I think that you can almost suppose that anything that's a consumable in your manufacturing process will probably not be subject to tax as of July 1.
Do we have another question from the audience? Come on, now you've got questions. I saw you talking to them before we started. All right. I have a question that was submitted to me for someone that couldn't be here today. The voting, with the election coming up and the issue on immigrants and people coming into the community, how can we make sure that the people who vote are registered voters?
Thanks for the question, Val, and that's something we've tried to work on in the Senate for a number of years. Senate Democrats block it. I strongly believe we should have voter ID. I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all, and I think it's the surest way to protect our voting privileges and the right to vote. Absolutely essential. That it won't move out of the Senate given the current majority position.
Do we have another question? CRA is not here. You can ask her on his questions.
Relating, excuse me, I'm Cheryl Lockwood, and I live here in Oskaloosa. Relating to the voter issue that you just mentioned concerning cards in order to vote, don't we already have a system in which we have a card that's provided to us that we are a registered voter?
Yes, we do, but you don't have to show that card to vote. All you have to do is appear on the list, and even if you don't appear on the list, you just say I'm here, and they'll allow you to vote with a provisional ballot. So there is no way of knowing that you are indeed who you say you are without an ID. You're not required to show an ID. That's the issue.
Do you have any questions?
I was composing this last night John Uckman, Oskaloosa. I was composing this last night as I was in bed, and I said, no, I can't say anything, this is going to take a half hour, but looks like we got the time. No. A lot of the things are falling in place now because of the 2.5 for education. 2.5? 2.25. less than the governor recommended, but I understand because of the amount of money that's available. Now, part of that is because we gave Walmart and those people several millions of dollars here a couple of years ago. We also said that the Medicaid program, which the federal government was going to pick up for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was, with no cost to us, our governor decided that, no, we'll do that. And now we're turning it over to a private company where we're going to pay them $450 million a year to run our program for us. Is there any correlation there because all of this money is not coming in anymore or is now going out? Is that a big reason why we don't have any money to spend on water issues, recreational issues that was voted on several years ago? I see in the next several years that this problem as far as having income to do anything is going to be pretty static the way it is. It looks like the farm economy right now is not improving. We've coupled, which I'm sure it makes a farmer that bought a $500,000 combine real happy that he can write that off and everything, costing the state $90 million. Your job should be easier, I would guess, in the next several years because there won't be much money to do anything, and we'll settle back and you guys can go home, and education will be slowly dropped down the list of the states. What are we, something like 34th or something now? I just see some real problems on some of the things that we've done in the last few years that are going to haunt us for years and years and years to come. Comments?
Thanks, John. You about took the half hour there, so, well, and I try not to ramble too much, because I think we all understand the gist of your question, but I don't have my chart with me today. But since I came into the legislature in 2013, by far the biggest increase in the cost of state government has been education. We're spending $513 million a year more on education this year than we did in 2013. That's not my numbers, that's LSA numbers, that's not refutable. So the biggest burden to the taxpayers has been education. And I don't argue with that. It's a huge priority, and I think that's demonstrated by the fact that that's 55% of our state budget. The second biggest component of increased state spending is Medicaid, which is up $400 million per year over that 2013 timetable. And then the third thing is what you mentioned. You mentioned Walmart, and I understand that. It's also the businesses around the square here in Oskaloosa, including that of my predecessor, who has been very thankful for the commercial property tax rollback. My first year in the Senate, when we did do the property tax reform, I remember getting a letter, an email from a doctor in Davenport who, through a variety of circumstances, ended up owning a commercial property. He rented it. The owner had to sell it or something. He bought it. And only then did he realize he was paying $5 per square foot per year for property tax on a commercial property. My point is, commercial property taxes were badly out of line. The growth in those has been very, very significant. I've got people in this room that could confirm that for me, I'm sure. So that needed to be brought back into line. Now, and it isn't just about Walmart. Like I said, it's about businesses around the square. So we always have the discussion on how we spend taxpayer dollars. Your point about the $500,000 combine and the $90 million, you phrase that a $90 million cost to the state. No, it's not a $90 million cost to the state. If we maintain tax policy consistent with previous years, that $90 million would stay in the pockets of farmers and small businessmen and teachers, because that was part of this too. So I think to couch that in terms of it costs the state, that's not how I view the world. I believe that's a direct cost. We'd have been taking $90 million out of small business owners' pockets, out of farmers' pockets, and we would have, as I called it a few weeks ago, a sucker punch, in the sense that they were expecting tax policy to be consistent from year to year. And this was simply a blindside, no, we're not going to do that this year because we need $90 million. So I'll let my colleagues take that further as they want, but that's how I see it.
I have a little bit to add to that. The idea of being able to expense in 1 year, business expense of buying a combine or whatever, has got to be compared to depreciating it over 5 years. In both cases, that expense and those taxes are not paid on that. It's just a matter of timing of when the tax is paid. Instead of having all 5 years' taxes paid in 1 year this year, it's spread out over 5 years. We're going back to the depreciation method, but it's not that somebody has changed how much is taxed. We do allow a truck driver who spends $150 going from one place to another carrying cargo to be able to deduct the cost of his gasoline when he gets done. It's a cost of doing business. If you have to have a combine to be able to trade 200 bushels per acre and provide a quarter of our economy in the state, we allow the deduction of that business expense, and we have allowed it immediately as expensive, but we normally, in normal accounting, you would do it over a 5-year period. No, it's only different. It's not that we're decreasing the taxes on the person.
Yeah, I would join my colleagues in saying I find that most of what you said is just plain wrong. Yes, we did reduce commercial property tax with the votes of most of the education advocates in both houses. It was not just the Republicans shoving something through. It was pretty much a bipartisan, large majority issue in both houses. And in addition to that, as Larry said in his opening statement, 87% this year of all new money is going to education, K-12 education, 87%. If that's not a priority, I don't know how we could make it any more of a priority. That means we're using only 13% of the new money to run all other state functions. That is absolutely a priority in my mind. The other thing is, if we are costing the state so much, why are not those who advocate more for this or more for that, why are they not advocating for a tax increase? That's one way we could fix this. We could spend more if we raise taxes, but none of the advocates for spending more will bring up a bill that says let's increase taxes because it's politically not feasible. So we're doing as much as we can for education and all other functions of government as we possibly can and still be responsible custodians of the taxpayers' money. And we'll continue to do so.
A big part of my point was that 87% goes to education, fine. Had not some forethought on some of these other issues taken place a couple of years ago, there would have been more in the pot to divvy up to other things that are going on. Things like what would the budget look like had not the two mental health institutes been shut down and the Tama girls' home been shut down? If the money would have, there would have been money to run those, which wasn't done.
John, where would the money come from? You're advocating more spending. How would that help?
Well, there's going to be spending. One of the school districts yesterday was going to raise their property tax for schools $1 up. There's other issues that come into play with the transfer of the Medicaid to a private operating system, I saw where Mayo Clinic is no longer going to accept patients from Iowa, even those that live 30 miles away across the border, because of the new managed care. Like I said, I'm not denying that, 87%, I'm saying that some things that were done didn't forecast that what's going to happen down the line is going to haunt us and go on for years and years and years and years.
I understand your point. What it seems like always gets lost in the discussion on education funding is the fact that by nature of it being 55% of our state budget, it swallows hundreds of millions of dollars where other things maybe take millions of dollars. I'll give you a case in point. I voted no on the education funding this week, and that was a hard vote. I'm one of only 6 that voted no. And there's a number of reasons for that. And one is what is being touted as a 2.25% increase in supplemental state aid is undeniably a 5.2% increase for PK through 12 education funding for next year. So the 2.25 is the number everybody hears. The real number is 5.2%. How do we get from 2.25 to 5.2? One is a good reason. I'm told that the student enrollment is up about 1% in the state. Okay, so that takes a 2.25 to a 3.25 roughly. The other big component is the teacher leadership compensation part that was passed in 2013. And I don't remember the exact number. It's north of $50 million new money going into teacher leadership this year. And then there's still a piece of that my staff hasn't answered to me, how we got to 5.2. The numbers are this. We went from 2.953 billion for K-12 education in 16 to 3.107 billion this coming year. That is the 5.2%. And that's what the taxpayers are pulling out of their pocket, regardless of what number people are using. That's what the real impact on Iowans is. So, and then the other component to that on education, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to pick on our local school district. Do you remember what the wage and benefit package increase was last year? Negotiated? If I remember right, it was 3.1%. Tom, is that pretty close? The state provided 1.25% last year, new funds. The local school board provided a 3.1% increase in wage and benefit package last year. The CPI, the CPI went up. Does anybody know how much that went up from 2014 to 2015? It went up 0.1%. There is the problem. We keep negotiating, and I have nothing against teachers. That isn't the matter. The matter is we keep having to cater to the demands of the teachers union, because arbitration's a joke in the state, because school boards will always lose that battle. So you see how the numbers don't add up here. 0.1% increase in the cost of living, a 3.1% increase in the compensation, and a 1.25% new money from the state. So maybe someone can help me sort through those numbers, but there's where the problems lie in my view.
I just want to add a little bit to that. The extra money was $9.2 million because when we went from allowable growth to supplemental state aid, the state took over the responsibility of paying that 1/8 of the bill that went from property taxes. So now the state pays the increases in the property tax. That's $9.2 million.
you. Do we have another question from the audience?
Hello, I'm Cheryl Lockwood. I was just wondering, and I believe we've asked this question before in previous meetings, but I just want to emphasize it as an important point again going forward. With us going to privatization of Medicaid, I would like to see the support unilaterally with both parties of the oversight of the actual quality of services that are provided under the Medicaid program. What is your response to that?
I think there will be oversight. There has been oversight of the Medicaid program. Those people in DHS who've been doing that, they're not going anyplace. They're still employees of the state, and they will provide oversight just like they always have. In addition to that, the House is considering a considerably scaled back version of the Senate bill, and possibly there will be additional oversight. But I'm not concerned about there being a lack of oversight.
Allison McGuire, and I was curious with 1 in 6 Iowans who are going to be affected by the privatization of Medicaid and the closing of 2 mental institutions this year in Iowa, what are your remarks regarding how people are going to get access to the mental health care that they need under the new Medicaid laws?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I think you were assuming that there's going to be some loss of care. Is that your concern? Why do you worry about that?
I'm curious where people are going to go if the system is already overrun and 2 of our institutions have closed this year. If it's more difficult for people to get access via a new system and there's fewer places for them to get care, how are people going to deal with that? Where are they going to go?
Well, the closing of the facilities has been in works for some time. As to the new system, we're going to find out on the 1st of April how well it works. I realize there's a great deal of concern and worry about maybe it won't work, but I don't think there's any reason to suppose that it won't. These people who have been in these companies that are in the managed care business have been doing this for some time. The DHS people who have designed this program seem to be confident it's going to work. I guess we'll see. If there are problems, we will move to fix them. But I think it's a little bit too early to assume that there are going to be problems.
Do we have another question from the audience?
Good morning, Tom Richardson, Oskaloosa School Board. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate you coming to Oskaloosa. My question's on school funding, but it's probably different than you might be expecting. The information I received this week on the 2.25% funding, the requirement for 3rd grade reading summer school and the potential change in the standardized testing, there's funding questions there. Is that to be included in 2.25%? Is that yet to be determined, or can you share any information on those 2 items? Thank you.
Short answer, Tom, is I don't know for sure. There was a $15 million component of that under categorical spending that actually Senate Democrats killed. And that is, quite frankly, because they realize we have budget limitations. So that was part of that agreement that dropped at the wayside, and I'm told that the Senate Democrats, why can't I think of our negotiator, Todd Bowman from Oskaloosa, who's a teacher, led the negotiation for Senate Democrats, and he dropped that off. But I want to go back to the bigger picture, what I just addressed earlier. We were assailed. Todd Bowman did it this year. We were assailed a few weeks ago in this room about the 3rd grade retention and so forth. And I'm going to rest my case. See, we give wage and benefit packages that are in excess of new funding, and then we say we don't have money for third grade retention. I think that's part of the problem.
Do we have another question from the audience?
I have a statement.
Okay.
The problem that Ken is talking about is the problem with the school board when they are involved with negotiations with the union. The choice that they have is to go with an arbitrator, which almost invariably chooses, and the arbitrator can only pick between the union number or the school board number, and they're not empowered to be able to pick a number in between. And we ran a bill out of the House last year to allow that, and the Senate Democrats, I must have spoken too long. The Senate Democrats wouldn't hear of it. Last April, the governor signed a bill. Well, the second half of that discussion is the school board would then have the ability to go and negotiate or actually litigate, go to a judge, pay for an attorney, and let a judge make the decision between the two numbers. Unfortunately, the way the law was before last April, they had to use the money that was for use in the classroom to spend on the lawyer and the legal fees. And, you know, the unpaid volunteers and school boards didn't want to spend the money that was used for classroom to be able to try to get a good settlement. So always they would go with the arbitrator's decision, and that almost always was in favor of the union. Well, last April, the governor signed a bill that said that school boards could use their management funds for the purpose of litigating, adjudicating a decision between the union and the teachers, union and the school board. And that hasn't been widely known, but that's a path that school boards should take because they are spending more than the state is capable of supplying. And that's why we hear this is not money, because you get 4% settlements when we hand out 2%. Where's that going to end up? So they need to do something locally to solve this problem, because at the state level, we can't create instantaneous money. We're not the federal government, we can't print this stuff.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks again for coming here. When you guys elected me to be on the city council, there was one thing I learned really early. They were always talking about revenue. They always talk about revenue. And I've said ever since I got there, when we say revenue, let's say tax. Don't call it revenue. It's tax, and we all know that. And I think the most pertinent thing that's been said here this morning is, and I don't know which one of you said it, but why isn't their phone ringing off the hook, their email going off the hook to raise taxes? I said this last time we were here. Don't forget, business pays 100%. There's two other groups that don't pay their fair share. So, you know, taxes can come up. The mayor would let us pave every road in Oskaloosa if you'll let us raise our taxes. So you've got to listen to what they're saying, you know, to that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to make a comment about taxing corporations. It all sounds like a good idea because it's not taxing us. It's taxing this corporation, and the corporation is just a legal device. Stockholders own it, and board members manage it. But the fact is, a corporation doesn't really pay taxes. Corporation has two choices. If there's a tax put on a product, the income tax, they put that in the cost of their product and they send it out the door, and then it becomes a general sales tax. It raises the price of their product. As long as they can keep doing that, they do it. If the income taxes get too high, what happens is the companies in surrounding states who have lower income taxes, they provide their product without a large effective sales tax, and they take the business. So the net result is either it becomes a sales tax on the citizens, or it ends up causing the company to shut down because the competitors can sell a cheaper product. So we shouldn't focus too much on taxing corporations, because it's either going to increase taxes on us, or it's going to send our businesses to out-of-state locations.
Do we have another question? All right, gentlemen, I have a question. Iowa's turtle population has been impacted by foreign demand for turtle meat. Can you please provide some insight into this problem and the bill to create a limited harvest season?
Gee, thanks, Fallon. I had to do a 48-hour crash course in turtle population a couple weeks ago. I was on a subcommittee to deal with this at the Senate. As your question indicated, there is a value to turtle meat, I understand, especially in Chicago and in China. And we have about 100 or so commercial turtle harvesters in the state of Iowa. And the concern was that the turtle population, I'm not really talking about just snapping turtles, there's what's called soft-shell turtles in the state. They got names, but I don't remember them. That population was being diminished. And my first, and part of the bill was also to create a study so that we could quantify what our turtle population is doing in the state. That's a good idea. I actually, when this got dumped in my lap, decided I probably offered an amendment. Let's do the study now, and then let's look at the season and the bag limits maybe a year or two or three down the road. But a little more study and a few phone calls, I discovered that to the best of my knowledge, our turtle population is suffering. And part of the reason is every state around us has a season, and every state around us has a limit, like we do for other hunting and hard trapping things. So guess who shows up in Iowa when other states are out of season? Turtle harvesters from out of state. So I think it's a real problem. We're going to do the study. I ended up sticking my neck out here and signing the pardon. That was bad.
Give it a 6, though. It's pretty.
And we called this a shell bill, and that made it through the funnel, actually. We had a few little fun with this. But so I supported the bill in subcommittee and in full committee and on the floor. I don't remember if we've actually dealt with it before yet, but I really think it's a valid concern. Turtles reproduce very slowly, like they do everything else, very slowly. Their eggs are very susceptible to being scavenged by raccoons and possums and all our other wildlife. And then if we have the added burden of commercial harvesters, we probably need to look at it.
With that extensive background information, I'm happy to say that I voted for the bill.
I wanted to make sure that snapping turtles were excluded, though, because I have ponds and children swim in those ponds, and snapping turtles are nasty creatures, and I wanted to be able to shoot them anytime I wanted to.
Does anyone have another question for the rep? All right, this is an easier one for you. Although March Madness is not a fantasy sport, I felt appropriate to bring up the bill about fantasy sports. Can you provide some insight into where this bill will end up this year?
As chairman of the state government committee that's handling this bill, this is the bane of my existence. 3 or 4 years ago, somebody brought me a bill that said, hey, let's legalize fantasy sports. I don't know if you guys know what this is, but it used to be a bunch of guys getting together in their basement and drinking beer and saying, let's see whose team wins at the end of the season. and then they handed out a trophy or something. Well, in the meantime, it's become a multi-million dollar, hundreds of million dollar industry across the country. And all of a sudden we have an army of lobbyists pushing to do this. So a bill came over from the Senate that pretty much said, if you want to play tiddlywinks, go ahead. If you want to play fantasy sports, go ahead. We don't care. My take was, first of all, they tried to say that this is a game of skill. It's not gambling. Well, it absolutely is gambling. You put money down in hopes of getting more money back by picking the right quarterback for your fantasy team. There's no difference between picking a quarterback and picking a quarter horse. So it's absolutely gambling. So I said to the lobby, here's what we're going to do. First of all, it's going to be under the Racing and Gaming Commission like all other gambling in the state. You're going to have to get a license, and if you screw up in another state or in this state, we're going to take your license away and you're done. And we're going to tax you just like every other business in the state. And that is what the House bill would do. We're still struggling with whether it's an expansion of gambling in the state or not, whether we really ought to get involved in this or not. But my take is if we are to get involved, we're going to treat it like every other gambling industry in the state and tax them to death.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience?
I guess I'd just like to know, I would assume if the legislature passed the bill on privatizing Medicaid, what were the reasons that you felt that this was a good idea?
The legislature never passed a bill authorizing Medicaid privatization. That was an executive action by the governor. Totally.
Do we have any other questions or comments? All right. I have a question for you. Can you please provide us an update on the medical marijuana bill?
That's my other fun bill. As a member of the Commerce Committee, I was handed the bill about medical marijuana. And frankly, it's my belief that medical marijuana is probably helpful for a lot of people who are suffering tremendously, primarily for seizure victims, but other people who suffer from chronic pain. And I would like to provide relief for them if we can do so. 2 years ago, we passed a bill that said, in essence, you can use cannabidiol, but you can't bring it into the state, and we're not going to manufacture it in the state, and therefore, you're just kind of out of luck. The bill that came before us initially was modeled on the Minnesota law, we were told, although there's certainly some significant differences between the bill we got and what Minnesota actually has in place. So in the interest of trying to get it through the legislature, my subcommittee drastically revised the bill to limit it. And primarily what we did was to say, we're going to go from, I think it was 4 manufacturing facilities and 12 dispensaries, which is more than Minnesota has, and they have twice our population, down to 2 facilities, which were both manufacturers and distributors. And in addition to that, we took a list of diseases, which was everything from epilepsy to, frankly, hangnails as being applicable, and reduced it to just 3. And the primary one is epilepsy. There's also terminal cancer with defined by less than a year to live, and multiple sclerosis. There was not a lot of science went into that, but there was a good deal of political guesswork that went into that, because the whole purpose of scaling it back, excuse me, was not to exclude people who need it. It was to make it politically palatable to get it through the process. And I'm not real proud of our reasoning on that, but the fact of the matter is, if we had not scaled it back, we couldn't even get it out of subcommittee. So by scaling it back, we got it through the Commerce Committee. It has to go to the Ways and Means Committee because there are fees involved, and that is proving to be a difficult lift. I'm not sure what we can anticipate. I think if the bill ever came to the floor, it would pass. But there are a lot of hurdles to get it to the floor. So I'm still advocating for it. I think it's the right thing to do. And we will see where it goes. But right now, it's kind of stuck in committee.
Well, I supported the present bill for children that have epilepsy and have fits. Some of them had hundreds of them a day. We keep getting requests for different kinds of diseases, and the problem, well, first off, we didn't outlaw them bringing them in from out of the state. The problem is if someone buys the oil in Colorado, they probably pass through Nebraska and they get arrested in Nebraska, or could. The real issue is that the Food and Drug Administration has the authority over this, and the federal government has that authority. So there's a law in the books that at any instant, the federal government could decide to actually, sort of like dealing with our borders, they could decide to actually follow the law and start arresting those who make it. And so that puts a number of people at risk. We couldn't stop that. All we've said in our laws is we won't arrest you if you're registered and you have 3% of canola oil in your possession of no more than a certain amount. But that doesn't solve the problem if the federal government decides, hey, that's against the law, you're under arrest no matter where you are. There's a resolution that Rob Taylor and I are trying to get going in the House, put the heat on the Food and Drug Administration, to put aside the requirement for double-blind tests and actually use the statistical data out there of what kind of benefits have happened with all these different laboratories. There's like 20 states now, I think, that have marijuana laws allowing people to do these things. And so just like the smoking, there weren't the blind tests for the Surgeon General to decide that smoking was harmful. They have statistical data. We'd like to see the federal government use statistical data now to determine that marijuana derivatives actually are helpful. The problem is that marijuana is Schedule 1. It's not Schedule 2. Morphine is Schedule 2. Doctors can administer morphine, but doctors cannot without losing their DEA card. They can't administer anything that comes out of marijuana, which to me is nuts. I mean, I think opium and marijuana and those things are much more dangerous than marijuana, but the way it is, a doctor will lose his license if he does the administration. So if the FDA did its job, changed the scheduling, used the statistical data, then doctors would handle it just like they handle morphine, would be able to provide it to cancer patients and anyone else. That's the sensible way. No one's at risk if they do it that way.
Just one more piece of information I think that is relevant on that question, and I did support the bill 2 years ago with that very limited use of the cannabidiol oil. But what's important, I think, this year, is the University of Iowa, along with some other research entities, are doing a double-blind clinical study on a product called Epidiolex, which, if that proves to be successful, and I think it's encouraging, that would provide a safe, legal, tested product to deal with these epileptic seizures. So I think it's unwise for us to get too carried away with significant changes this year until we see what the results of that are.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience?
Dave Creutzfeld with the mayor of Oskaloosa. Tom had mentioned that if I could, I would pave every street in Oskaloosa, and that's a temptation. Like the school, they tell me I can't do it without enough funding from the state. wondered what was happening as far as the increase in the fuel tax that was passed last year. Are we seeing any big increases in the revenue stream coming in for road repairs and that sort of thing in the state?
I can't give you a numbers answer, I don't know. I mean, I've not heard there's any fraud involved, so I would assume we're collecting 10 cents more per gallon, and that those new monies are being distributed under the terms of the old road use tax formula. So I guess sent numbers to the cities, to the counties a year ago, what that meant, and I don't want to try to recall those numbers right now, but do you have reason to suspect that it's not happening?
I was wondering if it was more, that with the decrease in the cost of gas, it's more of a temptation for people to hop in the car, drive out and do something. Therefore, there might be, from the state perspective, something north of what was estimated.
I could request those numbers from the Department of Transportation. I'll try to do that Monday. Maybe we can get some updated numbers and get it back to you.
But there have been no school buses full of children going down bridges in the state. The Route 20 is being taken care of very well.
Do we have any other questions? Can you provide some information on renewable chemical manufacturing tax credits?
Okay, what this bill is, the idea of this whole thing is that in the petroleum industry, there's the sale of gasoline and motor oils and that type of thing, but there's a more profitable business of making pharmaceuticals and other more costly things from petroleum. Well, that hasn't been done with renewable fuels, with ethanol or biodiesel. And the idea is to create that kind of industry in Iowa where there's a better profit margin and it's better for the state then to be able to use its resources more effectively.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Can you provide some insight into some of the bills that have died and if you expect to see them revive next year?
I'll touch on one. Larry mentioned it early on, fetal tissue bill. I submitted that bill into the Senate. It never got a subcommittee hearing, so it died in the Senate. The House essentially passed a bill with my language in it a couple of weeks ago. But I would expect that as it gets to the Senate floor, it will die again. And I will guarantee you that will not go away as long as I'm up there. I'll keep trying.
I had two bills that died. One would have moved school board elections from September to November to coincide with mayor and city council elections. Right now, average turnout for school board elections across the state is 7%. In Spencer, it was 1.4%. The average for municipal elections across the state is 20%. So it's by simply moving those elections to coincide with municipal elections, we would not only save money, we would triple voter turnout. Every bill that I'm aware of in the last 20 years or more that has addressed voting has been focused on how do we get more people to vote. The result of all of those bills is minuscule. If we can triple turnout for an election, to me, that is absolutely the right thing to do. That bill will definitely be back next year. The other bill had to do with getting uninsured motorists off the road. Seemed to me like a no-brainer. It seems like everybody who's been in a car accident, the other guy didn't have insurance. The industry will tell you that there's something like 8% of people driving around without insurance. In some of these states where they have instituted methods of trying to determine how many people are out there, turns out it's closer to 30% are driving around without insurance. So this bill would simply make it possible for a highway patrolman to look at a license plate and determine from his computer that guy doesn't have insurance. Stopping, ticketing, fining. In essence, it's increasing the risk of driving around uninsured. The likelihood of getting caught right now is nearly zero. If you don't violate some other law or get involved in an accident, you're probably not going to get caught. If you make it so the guy can look at your license plate, the odds of getting caught are going to go way up and thereby drive people toward getting insurance in the first place. So I think that was a good bill. And that one is still actually kind of hanging by a thread because it can be amended on something else. But if it dies this year, it'll be back as well.
The bill on fetal tissue that Ken wrote, I submitted it to the House. There was another bill about fetal tissue that originated in the House, and Ken's words became a strike after on that. It passed the House, it didn't get through the Senate. Another bill that I wanted to see, just because it happened to me, I thought it wasn't right, was I bought a gator. You know what a gator is? It's like a mule. It's an ATV that's got side-by-side seating. And the rules for gators or ATVs are you don't pay a sales tax on it if you use the majority on the farm, and it doesn't have to be registered if it's used on the farm. Well, I bought the gator, and I didn't pay sales tax. That was good. But then they put a sticker on it, a registration sticker, and a $45 fee that's supposed to be renewed every year. And I went to the staff and the state house and said, well, that's not the way the law reads. The law reads you're not supposed to have to do that. Joe Sinclair has, I don't know, 9 or 10 different John Deere dealerships, and that's the policy in their dealership. So I had a bill written up and put in the transportation, I think it was transportation group, and it never got anywhere. So I'd like to see that revived because I don't think that the fact that an ATV has side-by-side seating rather than front to back should make a difference in how it's taxed or how it's registered.
I'll continue on with a few more, just real briefly. Ideas that are out there, and some of them are in bill form. One is to equalize school transportation equitably around the state. I don't know what you pay in Oskaloosa, Tom, but it's several $100s a year just to get kids to school. West Burlington pays $41 per student to get them to school. Some school districts are paying over $1,000 just in transportation. And that money comes out of the same pot as the classroom. So some schools literally have $1,000 less per student to spend on education because of transportation. That's out there. We've talked about voter ID. That's something that's never going to go away until we get it done. We've talked about taxes a little bit. Iowa's known as a land with friendly people and an unfriendly tax code. We need to keep working on that. There's bills to require drug testing for recipients of state funds. I think that's reasonable. Number of other things out there that simply don't go anywhere in the Senate, but I think we need to have a good discussion.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. No more questions? This is the last eggs and issues. All right.
As our legislators are willing to stick their neck out on the turtle bill, one more question. Being they're political people, who do you think President Clinton's going to nominate for the Supreme Court? Have any idea on that?
President Clinton is termed out.
All right. Do you want to provide us with some closing statements? I know this is our last eggs and issues, so if you've got anything that you want to update us on that we're going to see in the last few weeks.
Well, my final comment is I hope that you go out into different districts and help elect more conservative senators. We need that to be able to get anything done in the House.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you again for taking time out of your weekend to come, especially Easter weekend, to come and let us know what issues are important to you. We really do value that. We work for you after all, And if we don't know what you think is important, deciding on our own is not a very good way of doing business.
Yeah, just to repeat the thanks for everybody. This is a great forum. From what we hear around the state, this is as well attended as any. And I will tell you, it's an honor and a privilege to represent you in the Senate. We may disagree on some things, but that's our political process. We listen. And so thanks again for being involved and being such great citizens.
That concludes our Eggs and Issues session for today and actually for 2016. Thank you again, Ken, Guy, and Larry for coming out and joining us today. We'd also like to thank Oski News, Oskaloosa Herald, CRI for the sound equipment, the Sun and KVOE for providing coverage, and to Midwest One Bank for providing coffee. We thank you for coming, and we hope to see you all again next year, and have a great Easter weekend.